Hello and welcome to Kontena online meetup. I'm Lauri Nevala. I'm a co-founder and software engineer at Kontena. Today we are talking about Kontena Stacks. And when we are speaking about Kontena Stacks, we are talking about software stacks. A software stack is a group of programs that work in tandem to produce a result or achieve a common goal. So, how we are nowadays define our dependencies in our applications. So we have some dependencies where we describe what are the third-party components and system libraries that we want to use. So how we are doing that in a container environment? We might have a Docker Compose YAML file where we define the database cluster and configure and take care of all the system internals, that how we are starting the cluster and that, etc. And then we have our application. And I think that's the most important part that matters. So, are there any better ways to do it? With Kontena Stacks, we are trying to bring some help to that problems. So you can just define some requirements and includes that you want to use. This is still a draft. This is not the real thing yet, but that's the target that we are trying to achieve with Kontena Stacks. So Kontena Stacks, the ultimate goal of Kontena Stacks is that developer can just define service dependencies of the application and he doesn't need to worry about those internals. So what are Kontena Stacks? Kontena Stacks are pre-packaged and reusable collections of container services with associated configuration in the form of YAML file. Kontena Stacks can be categorized roughly in 3 categories. Those are service stacks, in-house stacks, and application stacks. Service stacks, those are ready-made stacks that you can use with your application. Those can be installed directly from Kontena Stack Registry or from YAML files, and you can just use those. Typically, those stacks are, for example, clustered databases like MongoDB replica set, MariaDB Galera cluster, or Elasticsearch, or maybe some API gateways like Kontena Load Balancer or Kong, or basically any third-party component that your application needs. Let's take a look example of MongoDB. So I have a MongoDB stack that contains 3 instances of Mongo replica set pairs. And there's a container hooks that establish the replica set automatically. And we can just deploy this with Kontena Stack install and deploy. So now Kontena will deploy this stack and establish a replica set of MongoDB cluster. So we can take a look. And we can see all the instances are running. And from the logs, we can see that the replica set is initialized. Okay, let's forward. And the in-house stacks, those are our custom-made stacks that contains our application services. And typically configuration for those stacks, those are stored in the version control system among other application source code. We have an example basic to-do application. And our stack file, it contains a load balancer and our application, web application. And our web application is using the MongoDB cluster that we just deployed. And we can deploy this. And now the stack files is asking the domain for our application. Let's put something. And after that, it will deploy the application. And let's take a look. Okay, now we can see we have a load balancer running and our web application running. And from the browser, we can see it's responding and it's using the MongoDB as a database. Great. Okay, that was an example of in-house application stack. And then we can have application stacks. Those are ready-made applications that we can just start using. Those can be, for example, Jenkins or Drone CI, GitLab, you name it. And those applications are available on Kontena Stack Registry, so we can just install them from there. Okay, let's take a look. We have a Jenkins stack that we can just deploy. It's deployed from Kontena Jenkins stack file. Now the stack is asking how many slaves we want. Let's put 3. And now Kontena will deploy that application stack to our grid. Okay, it's now deployed. And we can verify from the browser. Okay, now Jenkins is started to configure itself. And we can, of course, verify from CLI that all the instances are running. So we have 1 master and 3 slave instances. So it's very easy to install some applications from ready-made stacks. Okay, Kontena stacks, those are described in YAML files. By default, Kontena will look kontena.yaml file. And the main goal of those stack files is to make stacks easy to configure, easy to install, and easy to share. The stack YAM file contains first there's stack definition, and second there's variables, and third there's service configuration. The stack definition, it describes the stack name. The recommended way is to use username/stack name format. The version follows semantic versioning, and the description option is something you see when you search stacks from a stack registry. Then you can expose some service from your stack. With that expose option, you can define the service you want to publish from your stack to other stacks. Kontena will then create stack.grid.kontena.local DNS address for that service. For example, the internal Kontena registry is deployed as a registry stack that exposes to internal API service. So the registry.test.kontena.local DNS name is alias for api.registry.test.kontena.local service container. And the other service containers and the host nodes, they can just use registry DNS alias. Then you can define variables in Kontena stack files. You maybe saw those questions that were presented when I installed those ready-made stacks, and those are defined in variables. So the variables can be used to fill in values and create some conditional logic in Kontena YAML files. And when you define variables, you basically give it some name and tell where the value is obtained from and where to store the value of that variable. By default, the value of the variable is set to local environment variable using the variable name. So you can reference with that later on. So here's a basic example of variable. Here is MySQL password. First, Kontena try to find it from local environment variables. Then it tries to find it from Kontena vault. And if it's not found yet, then it's prompt from user. And if user doesn't provide any value, it will get some random value. And it's stored to environment variable called MySQL root password. And then it's also stored to Kontena vault. So on future deploys, the value is found from Kontena vault. You can find the complete variable reference from our documentation. There's multiple examples how you can define and add some conditional logic and that kind of stuff. And then in stack files, you describe your application services. If you are familiar with Docker Compose files, then you are ready to go. You can extend those services in stack files. And if you have already deployed your Kontena applications with Kontena app commands, you can use the same service definitions. And you can find the complete YAML reference from our documentation as well. Okay. I already show you how you can install stacks. You can install stacks from Kontena Stack Registry and directly from YAML files. If you install those from YAML files, Kontena defaults to kontena.yaml file, but you can pass the file name to install command. And if you just use Kontena Stack install command, Kontena will initialize those services to Kontena master, but the services are not deployed. You can, of course, give it the deploy option to stack install command, and Kontena will then deploy the stack right away. And you can install stacks from Stack Registry. Then you just give the stack name as a parameter. And if you don't give any version, Kontena will automatically deploy the latest version. But you can, of course, define the exact version number of the stack you want to use. Here are some examples how you can use Kontena Stack Registry. So you can share those stack files to Kontena Registry and search with a stack name, some ready-made stacks. You can pull the stack and see the stack file and verify it's okay to use. And then you can push your own stacks to Kontena Stack Registry. And this is just the beginning, and with Kontena Stacks we are going to improve those in near future so that you can require and include other stacks within your stack. Like in the example on the beginning, I showed how it would be nice if you can just require some database to be used with your application. You don't have to define the internal logic of that database. And then we are concentrating on network isolation. So every stack will have some network subnet, and other stacks cannot connect to internal services of that stack. Then there will be some container vault isolation for the stacks. So if the variables will save some values to container vault, and when you remove that stack from your grid, those values will automatically be deleted as well. And then we are bringing some improvements to lifecycle management of stacks. There will be some rollback mechanism, how you can easily step down to previous version of that stack. And then we are improving the stack registry, so you can have organization stacks there. So not every stack needs to be under some personal user account. So that was a very brief introduction to Kontena Stacks. Please take a look on our documentation. There's lots of examples how you can define your stack files, and please share your stacks. If you have some general stack that is very handy and you want to share it, push it to Kontena Stack Registry. And if you have any questions, you can send us email. Please come to our Slack channel. And of course, we have these online meetups and local meetups you can join. And of course, go to our website. Our documentation is there. You can learn more about Kontena. Okay, thank you and happy holidays and see you next year.